The orca is called a killer whale. It hunts sharks, whales, and seals. It attacks animals weighing tens of tons and comes out victorious. But do you know who it has never, not once in the entire history of observations, killed in the wild? Us, humans. Not a single confirmed fatal case. Not a single attack with serious consequences. In all the time that scientists have observed orcas in the ocean, zero. And this is where the most interesting part begins, because this animal is not a good-natured little dolphin that likes swimming next to a boat. It is the apex predator of the planet, a creature with a brain that, by some measures, surpasses the human brain. A creature that lives in a family, teaches its children, mourns the dead, and remembers everything. Why does it not touch us? What happens inside that head when an orca sees a person in the water? Today, we will break down the orca from beginning to end. Biology, hunting, family, intelligence, and its relationship with humans, which turned out to be far more complicated than anyone could have expected. Stay until the end. There will be something there that will change your view of this animal forever. Let's start with the basic but important part. The orca is called a killer whale, and that is already two misconceptions in 3 words. First, it is not a whale. Second, killer is a word that gives it a completely wrong image, one it does not really deserve. The orca is the largest member of the dolphin family. Yes, a dolphin, just very, very big. Males reach 9 meters in length and weigh up to 10 tons. Females are smaller, around 7 meters and 5 to 6 tons. For comparison, that is roughly like 2 passenger cars placed one behind the other, alive, with teeth. The nickname killer whale is not scientific, but folk-based. It was given by Spanish sailors back in the 15th century, when they observed orcas attacking whales. The literal translation of the original Spanish was killer of whales. Somewhere in translation, the words switched places, and it became killer whale. A lucky mistake for a predator that does not mind having a fearsome reputation. The black and white coloring is not just beautiful. It is camouflage, refined by millions of years of evolution. The dark back makes the orca invisible from below against the dark depth. The white belly makes it invisible from above against the bright sky. Prey does not see it either from below or from above until it is too late. The white patches on the sides probably also help pod members recognize each other in murky water during a hunt. Speed, 55 kilometers per hour. For a creature weighing several tons, that is roughly as if a truck accelerated like a sports car. The secret is in the structure of the body. Powerful muscles along the spine work together with a layer of elastic connective tissue woven into the tendon, like thousands of rubber cords. When the tail moves in one direction, the tissue stretches and then pulls it back like a spring. With every muscle contraction, 87% of the energy spent returns back. This is almost perfect biomechanics. Engineers still study the structure of the orca's body as a model of movement in fluids. Where do orcas live? Everywhere, literally, from the Arctic to the Antarctic, from tropical seas to cold currents off the coast of Norway. The orca is the only large marine mammal that has mastered all the oceans of the planet without exception. They are seen off the coast of Kamchatka and off the coast of Patagonia, in the Mediterranean Sea and in the Sea of Japan. Wherever there is water and food, there are orcas. Even in the Arctic, where almost no large predators can get. Their lifespan is no less impressive than their size. Males live on average 30 to 40 years. Females are a completely different story. Some females live up to 90 years. 90. That is comparable to a human life. And this fact, as you will soon see, has enormous importance for the whole pod. The dorsal fin of a male orca is a story of its own. It can reach almost 2 meters in height. Straight, clear, visible from far away. In females, the fin is much smaller and slightly curved. By the shape and condition of the dorsal fin, researchers recognize specific individuals, just as people recognize acquaintances by their faces. Many orcas have fins with unique curves, notches, or scars, by which they can be identified throughout their entire lives. This allows scientists to conduct many years of observation of individual families without having to catch the animals. Orcas feed depending on which population they belong to. Some eat only fish and can swim thousands of kilometers in pursuit of their favorite salmon. Others specialize in marine mammals, seals, sea lions, and sometimes whales. These two groups are called resident and transient. Between them, there is a complete gulf in behavior, dialect, and even genetics. They live in the same waters, see each other, and completely ignore each other. Different cultures, different worlds. Some scientists have made an even bolder statement. They claim that transient and resident orcas are not just different populations. Their culture has divided them so deeply that it is only a matter of time before they become different species. Not because of geography, not because they were separated by mountains or oceans, but because they were separated by culture. This may be the only example known to us of cultural differences creating a new biological species. In the same way that some humans evolved the ability to tolerate lactose as cow's milk became part of the diet, orcas are evolving thanks to their own choices and traditions. First, about family, because without this, nothing else can be understood. If you want to understand the orca, forget the image of a lone predator. An orca is, above all, a social, family-based creature. And its family is organized in such a way that even anthropologists have something to think about. At the foundation is matriarchy. The pod is led by the oldest female, not the strongest male, not the largest one. It is the oldest female. She remembers more than anyone else. She knows where to feed in a hungry year. She knows the migration routes of fish, knows which places are better to avoid. Her knowledge is the collective memory of the pod, accumulated over decades. When resources are scarce, pods with living older females find food much more successfully than those where these females are gone. And here begins something absolutely amazing. Female orcas are among the few animals on Earth that go through menopause. This is an extremely rare phenomenon in nature. Besides orcas, it is known in short-finned pilot whales and narwhals, plus humans. In the overwhelming majority of animals, females reproduce until the end of life. But female orcas stop giving birth at around 30 to 40 years old, and then live for several more decades after that. Why? From the point of view of evolution, it would seem meaningless. Individuals that do not reproduce do not pass on genes further. But science found the answer, and it is called the grandmother effect. After a female stops giving birth, she stops competing for resources with her own children and grandchildren. All her energy goes into something else. She becomes the living library of the pod. In years when salmon disappear from the usual places, it is the oldest females who are the first to know where to swim. They remember routes that have not been used for 20 or 30 years, and lead the pod to places where the young have never been. Studies have shown, when the oldest female dies, mortality among her descendants rises sharply in the following years. The pod literally loses part of its collective mind. Now about sons. Honestly, when I learned this, I had to double-check several sources because it sounds almost unbelievable. Male orcas never leave their mother, do you understand? Never. They stay with her until her death. In most animals, males leave their birth group when they reach maturity. This is a basic evolutionary strategy that prevents inbreeding. Male orcas stay with their mother, mate with females from other pods during brief encounters, and return home. The consequences of this are striking. When the mother dies, mortality among her adult sons rises sharply over the next 2 years. And the older the son, the higher the risk. An adult male weighing 8 tons, 20 or 30 years old, and he still needs his mother. This does not fit at all into the usual ideas of predators as self-sufficient survival machines. A pod usually consists of 3 generations: the grandmother, her children, and her grandchildren, all together, always nearby. This is called a matrilineal group. Several such groups that regularly stay together form a subpod, and several subpods form a clan. Each pod speaks its own dialect. This is not a metaphor, it is literally true. Scientists began recording and analyzing the sounds of different pods back in the 1970s, and discovered that each group has its own set of calls and whistles that others do not have. Young orcas learn the dialect from their mother and the other members of the pod, just as children learn language. By dialect, it is possible to determine which clan the animal belongs to. It is a cultural marker, like an accent in people from different regions. Moreover, pods with similar dialects usually have closer family ties. Write in the comments, did you know that orcas have such a complex social life? I am sure that for most people this is a complete surprise. Orcas mourn the dead. This is perhaps the hardest thing I learned while preparing this video. In 2018, a female from one of the Pacific pods carried the body of her stillborn calf on her nose for 17 days. not letting it go. When the body began to sink underwater, she dived again and again and lifted it back up. The other pod members were nearby, sometimes also touching the calf. Researchers who observed this said that it was impossible to watch what was happening without feeling a tightness inside. Several times a year, when conditions line up well, several subpods of one clan gather together. This is called a superpod. Dozens and sometimes hundreds of orcas in one place. They do not hunt together. It is more like a social event. They circle, communicate, the young play, and adults restore bonds with those they have not seen for a long time. Researchers describe these meetings as something like a holiday, if of course such a word can be applied to orcas. But watching it, according to them, really feels exactly like that. Orcas have hierarchy, conflicts, seniority. The oldest females direct the hunt. They decide where and how to attack. The young observe and learn. Sometimes the elders deliberately create training situations, releasing already captured prey so that the young can practice on their own. There have been cases where older ones brought live prey to young orcas that did not yet know how to hunt, as if bringing a toy to a child. This is not instinct, this is culture, the transmission of knowledge across generations. Talking about orca behavior without talking about their brain is like discussing how a computer works without mentioning the processor. Let's look inside. An orca's brain weighs from 5 to almost 7 kilograms. For comparison, the human brain weighs about 1 kilogram and 400 grams. By absolute brain size, orcas rank second among all animals, behind only the sperm whale. But what matters is not only mass, but structure. There is such a measure, the gyrification index. It measures how strongly folded the cerebral cortex is, how many folds and grooves it has. The more folds, the more nerve cells fit into the same volume, and the faster information is processed. In humans, this index is 2.2, in bottlenose dolphins, 5.6, and in orcas, 5.7. This is the highest indicator among all animals on Earth. The orca's brain is more folded than the human brain. Personally, this is what hooked me the most in this topic. Not the size, not the speed, this brain. A creature we are used to perceiving as simply a big fish, but it thinks, remembers, feels, and perhaps is aware of itself. What does this mean in practice? Orcas are capable of complex planning. They understand cause and effect. They remember for a long time. They learn not only from their own experience, but by watching others. They pass knowledge to the next generation. What scientists call the cultural transmission of skills. The insular cortex deserves a separate conversation. A special brain structure that in humans is linked to self-awareness, empathy, and the ability to feel the state of another. In orcas, it is exceptionally well developed, possibly better than in any other species. This means, or at least very strongly suggests, that orcas are capable of something similar to compassion. They are aware of the state of other pod members. Perhaps that is exactly why they help injured relatives, do not abandon the weak, and mourn the dead. In 2001, scientists conducted a mirror test. Marks were placed on the bodies of orcas, a light mark on a dark area and a dark mark on a light area, and then they were given a mirror. An animal without self-awareness perceives the reflection as another individual. An animal with self-awareness understands that it is seeing itself. Orcas with marks spent a long time hanging in front of the mirror, turning their heads, studying their marks from different angles. Before the marks were applied, this behavior did not occur. This is not 100% proof of self-awareness. Science is careful with its wording, but it is a very convincing sign of a creature that is aware of its own body. Researchers have also documented in orcas something that can be called long-term memory in a social context. It is known that individuals recognize each other after years of separation. In one case, two females that had been separated and placed in different marine parks for several years, when reunited, immediately restored familiar communication patterns, as if they had never been apart. This is not simply memory of a face or silhouette. It is memory of a specific individual. Now about echolocation. Orcas produce clicks, high-frequency sounds with a frequency from 20 to 60 kilohertz. These clicks travel through the water, reflect off objects, and return back. Specialized fatty tissue in the front part of the head, called the melon, receives the reflected signal and sends it to the brain. As a result, the orca gets a three-dimensional picture of the surrounding space. It sees with sound at a distance of up to 150 meters. In dark water, at great depth, where vision gives nothing, the most striking thing is not the distance, but the accuracy. Orcas are able to distinguish different species of fish by echolocation signal. They hear the difference between Chinook salmon and other species of salmon and deliberately hunt exactly the one they want. This is a level of sensory resolution that surpasses the capabilities of many modern instruments. Besides clicks, orcas use whistles, short, high-frequency sounds used for quiet communication at short distances, and also calls, which travel for many kilometers through the ocean and allow pods that have split off in different directions to stay in contact. 3 registers of communication, each for its own situation, like 3 different communication channels in one creature. And now to what gives the orca its reputation as an apex predator: hunting. Different populations have different specializations, but one thing unites them. No strategy works alone. Everything is a team game. A team game with planning, distribution of roles, and tactical adjustments right during the attack. This is extremely rare in nature. The first strategy, and probably the most spectacular, is intentional stranding. Off the coast of Argentina, near the Valdez Peninsula, orcas have mastered a hunt that takes your breath away. They literally throw themselves onto the beach, grab sea lions right at the water's edge, and return back to the ocean. Sounds simple. In practice, this is one of the most complex and dangerous maneuvers in the animal world. To strand itself and return, an orca has to accelerate to about 30 kilometers per hour right at the surface of the water, precisely calculate the angle of the shore, guess the moment of the wave, and manage to turn parallel to the land before ending up in the shallows. A second, a fraction of a second, a meter of space, and everything can go wrong. If it misses, it gets stuck. Gravity starts pressing on the lungs. The muscles cannot support their own weight. Without water, an orca dies within a few hours. A mistake costs its life. That is why they learn this for years. The mother first checks the shore again and again herself, tries the angle, evaluates the pebbles, watches how the wave rolls back. Then she carefully pushes the calf toward the water's edge, just so it can feel solid ground beneath its body and overcome its instinctive fear of land. Then she demonstrates it herself at full strength. And only then comes the first independent attempt. The first attempts can fail. Sometimes a calf goes too far and gets stuck. Then the mother swims close and, with her movements, shows how to rock itself in order to get out. Sometimes it takes hours. This is a real school with exams that can be failed. Along the Valdez coastline lives a group of about 30 orcas. Of them, only 13 have mastered the stranding technique. The others could not or did not dare. This is a truly elite skill, mastered by less than half the pod. The second strategy is wave hunting in Antarctica. If stranding is boldness, then this is pure engineering thought. Antarctic orcas hunt seals that lie on floating ice floes. The problem? Reaching the seal directly is impossible. The ice floe is solid, and even a very strong orca cannot break it with a blow. But it can create a wave. A group of orcas accelerates in sync underwater about 15 meters from the ice floe, as close to the surface as possible without emerging. The seal does not see them, only the dark water. At the last moment, they all sharply dive underwater at the same time. The movement of their bodies creates a whirl that produces a wave a meter high or more. The first wave breaks the ice floe. The seal moves to a larger piece. The orcas surround the new floe and begin methodically, wave after wave, reducing it. They remove chunks of ice that interfere with acceleration. They push the floe into open water, where it is easier to attack. They think several steps ahead. When the floe is reduced to the right size, the final wave follows. The seal flies into the water. Scientists who observed this for the first time said it was hard for them to believe their eyes. Such a level of coordination and foresight in an animal. Click to one of the researchers, this surpasses the level of teamwork that most groups of humans are capable of. The third strategy is hunting gray whales. This is the hardest and longest operation in the orca's arsenal. A gray whale weighs 40 tons. Even for an orca alone, this is an impossible task. So again, the team works. The pod finds a female gray whale with a calf during migration. 2 or 3 orcas take on the mother, ram her, distract her, prevent her from focusing on defense. The others deal with the calf. The tactic is not to bite, but to ram. The massive, heavy skull of an orca is a weapon. They strike the calf, trying to weaken it, then begin pushing it underwater, not letting it rise to the surface and take a breath. The mother defends it desperately, but there are too many of them. Such an attack can last 2 or 3 hours, sometimes longer. When it ends, the orcas eat only the tongue and the soft tissues of the oral cavity. The whale's layer of fat is too thick to bite through. But even that is hundreds of kilograms of food, for which the pod spent hours of work. A conscious, rational choice. Take what can be reached and leave. Researchers who observed hunts on gray whales described what they saw as one of the most complex collective actions ever recorded in animals. During the attack, every pod member knows its role. Some attack, others hold position. Others wait their turn and switch places when the front ones get tired. This is not a chaotic pack. This is a coordinated team where everyone understands the common goal. The most striking thing in this hunt is persistence. Orcas do not retreat. If the attack fails, they regroup and start again. They can pursue a target for hours, changing tactics on the move. It is this persistence combined with intelligence that makes them unbeatable at the top of the food chain. And finally, the fourth strategy, which shocked the entire scientific world: hunting great white sharks. The great white shark is a symbol of ocean terror. 3 or 4 meters, powerful jaws, a perfect lone predator. But before an orca, it is practically helpless. Orcas pursue sharks in pairs or small groups. They ram the shark in the side, the blow stuns it, then they turn it upside down. In this position, the shark enters a state of tonic immobility. This is reflex catalepsy, complete immobilization. It does not resist. Then comes the most incredible part. Orcas open up the shark with surgical precision and remove only the liver. Nothing else. The liver of a great white shark can weigh several hundred kilograms and is rich in oily fat with enormous caloric value. Orcas know this and take only what they need. The rest of the body simply sinks to the bottom. This phenomenon, when fear of a predator changes the behavior of prey across an entire region, scientists call the ecology of fear. Orcas influence not only those they eat, but also those who simply know they are present. When sharks leave an area because of orcas, it changes the whole ecosystem. The pressure on the fish hunted by sharks changes. The distribution of fur seals changes. The behavior of other predators changes. One appearance of orcas triggers a chain of changes for many kilometers around. Great white sharks are so afraid of orcas that when they encounter them, they immediately leave the hunting area and sometimes do not return for more than a year. Researchers in South Africa observed, as soon as orcas appeared near the coast, sharks within a radius of several kilometers disappeared within a few hours. The tourist business based on shark diving in those places temporarily came to a complete halt. Did you know that great white sharks are afraid of someone? Write in the comments. Was that unexpected for you? And now we have reached the question we started with. Why does the orca not touch humans? In the wild, there is not a single confirmed fatal case of an orca attacking a human. 0. In the entire history of systematic observations, 0. There have been cases where orcas swam right up to divers, circled around yachts for hours. In recent years, off the coast of Spain and Portugal, there have been recorded cases where orcas approached sailing yachts and pushed them. At first, this frightened sailors. Some vessels were damaged, but scientists looked into it. Most likely, these were young individuals simply playing with an interesting object. Just like young orcas off the coast of Argentina practice on seaweed before real hunting. No people were hurt. Why do they not attack us? There is no definite answer, but there are several versions. First, humans are not part of their food preferences. Orcas of different populations specialize in specific prey: fish, seals, whales. A person in the water resembles none of their usual hunting targets, neither in shape, nor smell, nor sound. Second, intelligence. Orcas are smart enough to recognize humans as something separate. Not a threat, not food, a different category. Third, and perhaps the most convincing, culture. If no mother has ever hunted humans, then no one has taught the children to do it. And everything an orca knows, it learns from its family. Hunting preferences, strategies, dialect, all of this is passed from generation to generation. The tradition of not attacking humans may have formed just like any other pod tradition. And now, It is simply part of their cultural code. A completely different story unfolded in captivity. For several decades, orcas were kept in marine parks, primarily in the United States. Shows, pools, trainers, millions of spectators. It seemed spectacular and safe, until it became obvious that it was not. Cases of attacks on trainers have been recorded, including fatal ones. Cases that never happened in the wild in the entire history of observations. This became the reason for a serious conversation about what is really happening to this animal behind the glass of a pool. Scientists made one conclusion with enough confidence. An animal with high intelligence, a complex social life, and extremely close family bonds. Isolated, deprived of family, familiar space, and meaningful activity, behaves differently than in its natural environment. This says not so much about orcas themselves, but about what happens to a highly intelligent creature in conditions for which it was not created. I remember when I first read about this, I caught myself thinking, this is the real mystery. Not how they hunt, but why they do not do it to us there, in the ocean, where no one restrains them. Now, in many countries, keeping orcas in captivity is restricted or completely banned. And in the ocean, orcas still do not touch us, although they could. For all its power, the orca is vulnerable, and the threats it faces have nothing to do with natural predators. It has none. These threats were created by us. The first and most serious is chemical pollution. Polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs. A group of industrial chemicals that were used around the world until the 1982, and then were banned. But in the ocean, they did not disappear anywhere. They practically do not break down. They accumulate in the fatty tissue of marine animals and become more concentrated at every level of the food chain. The orca is at the top of this chain. It accumulates everything. In females, PCBs are partially passed to calves through milk in the first months of life. This means that every new calf begins life already with a dose of toxins. High concentrations suppress the immune system and reduce reproductive function. Some populations in Europe, particularly off the coast of the United Kingdom, now number only a handful of individuals. Scientists say directly, without changes, these populations are doomed to fade away. No calf has been born there for several years. The second threat is the reduction of the food base. Resident populations that feed on salmon suffer from its disappearance. Salmon is declining because of industrial fishing, destruction of spawning rivers, and changes in water temperature. Orcas have to swim farther and farther. Females give birth less often, and fewer calves survive. The southern resident population off the coast of North America, one of the most studied in the world, now numbers just over 70 individuals. This is already the edge. Third, noise. For a creature whose entire life is built on sound, this is a quiet catastrophe. The constant noise of ship engines, military sonar, and industrial installations literally drowns out their world. They cannot hunt normally, cannot communicate normally. Stress, disorientation, disruption of connection inside the pod. Fourth, accidental entanglement in fishing nets. Young individuals suffer especially because they have not yet learned to recognize the danger. For a pod where every calf counts, this is a blow to the future. Orcas are now included in international conservation lists. A number of regional populations are recognized as threatened. How effective protection will be depends largely on how quickly pollution levels can be reduced and the food base restored. Scientists and conservation organizations are working with these threats, reducing salmon catch volumes in key regions, setting restrictions for shipping near habitats of sensitive populations. In Canada, restrictions have been introduced on how close vessels may approach orcas of the southern resident population. In several countries, marine protected areas have been created where fishing is restricted. But the main obstacle is that PCBs in the water and in the fatty tissue of marine animals will not disappear for many decades, even if all sources of pollution are stopped right now. These chemicals are already in the system. They will circulate in food chains for a long time. This is perhaps the heaviest part of this topic. To realize that the problem was created over 100 years, and it will take much longer to solve. The orca is not just an animal. It is a mirror in which we unexpectedly see something familiar: family, learning, grief, culture, intelligence. It could kill us, but it does not. And that, it seems to me, says more about it than all its hunting strategies combined.